My name is Joseph O'Brien. I'm studying on the MBA at the moment. I've just finished my fourth module, Market Perspectives, and I'll be your moderator today. And our special guest is Ronald Dyer. He's a UL faculty member and an expert in risk and uncertainty in project management. And I'd like to greet you today. Welcome, Ron. Hello.
Hi, Joseph, and welcome everybody else. Good afternoon, good morning, and good night in some instances.
So Ron, I mean, we're looking at clean energy here. We know China has a pollution problem. We're going to discuss renewable energies in a second, and then obviously our programs as well. We have lithium here. It's described as the world's hottest, commodity. The price of lithium is absolutely skyrocketed. Everyone needs them for batteries. Can we foresee a battery-powered future? Is lithium on the rise for the foreseeable future?
If you want to know what's going to happen in terms of part of the future, a good example is what Elon Musk is doing right now with regards to solar-powered generators and shrinking them down to a very small scale. In terms, I'm not a lithium expert. I don't know very much about that market, but what I can say is that we would have to basically, it's sort of like if I use the analogy of what has happened with Intel and the computer over the last 20 years. We've gone from these giant machines to these desktops to these laptops, and then eventually now we basically don't need them anymore because our mobile phone can do just as much as almost as much and our tablet as a computer can. In order for the lithium and the battery industry, from a fuel cell perspective, to be able to do any significant damage, there would have to be an equivalent shrinking of that technology down to a reasonable enough size to be able to power something beyond a motor vehicle, a house, a building, that type of stuff. I think we're going to see solar taking the next lead, well, renewable energy, not just solar, taking some sort of lead in that process, coming first before we actually get to the battery power. And maybe if I were to sort of like take sort of like a mini crystal ball and look into the future, there could be a probable convergence, which would make sense to basically converge the lithium power with the solar power and create some sort of fuel cell that can be recharged through solar energy. So you have the lithium batteries being recharged that way. And that would be a huge groundbreaking, exercise if they can get to that point. But I don't see it as something happening. Again, I'm not going to wake up tomorrow morning and it's going to be an announcement like iPhone 7.
What does the future hold for oil and gas?
One of the things that we need to look at very carefully is process and the process reengineering that will take place within the oil industry to make it much more cost efficient. That's the thing that's really going to drive the industry over the next, couple of years, because we can't flip the switch and move to solar again. 3 years from now, are we going to have even double the penetration? It's roughly about 13% solar and 83% oil and gas. Are we going to have 26% solar by 2020, 2022? The question remains, what's the incentive? There's no incentive for the big producers to move away from oil and gas unless it becomes some huge climate change policy where the world just decides we're not using it anymore. For now, there's too much invested, and there's still too much to be recouped. So oil is here, and it's going to stay for at least the foreseeable future. And I think what we're going to have is a better integration of the renewable sources into the ecosystem so that you may find more houses being built with solar panels, more wind being used to reduce the overall energy bill. But I don't see a progressive, rapid weaning out of oil and gas over even the next 10 years. That just can't happen because what do you do with the capital investment in terms of not billions but trillions of dollars that has been put into this market over the last 100 years? One of the things that really a key skill that people need to do now is to understand the external environment and be able to pick up the trends relatively early in terms of what's going on to change direction. So if we're talking about, a key first skill, the ability to manage uncertainty and change within a decision-making environment. And that consists of several different components. It's not just being a news junkie like me and reading everything to understand what's going on outside. It's the computational and analytical skills that are required in terms of the risk analysis, the financial analysis, the understanding of how the external markets, prevail and dominate the decision making in terms of capital budgeting items for most of the large and even the smaller oil and gas companies. That's one area that needs to be looked at. The other area, I think, is definitely keeping a pulse and getting a better understanding of technology. One of the things I remembered when I got handed this course last year in February, there was a heavy sort of engineering base. And, one of the things I said to one of your colleagues, Fiona, was that, okay, students don't need to know how to calculate, joules and photovoltaic energy. They need to understand what it is and how it impacts on their decision making. Yeah. So the other thing is that I think students now need to really have almost a balance between their analytical skills in terms of the ability to understand what's going on from a market perspective, but also understand what are the emerging technologies. So for instance, you are in the oil and gas business. What does an Elon Musk moving into renewable energy mean for you as a company? Is he an immediate threat? Is he something from a blind spotting perspective that I need to keep on the radar? Because if suddenly tomorrow morning he gets the patterns right for, independently solar generators for houses, and basically you have major real estate developers start putting those in people's houses, it means that they no longer need to rely on fossil fuels or even propane or natural gas. And, what you have is a ripple effect. So understanding, it's not just a matter of basically saying, okay, fine, I understand from an engineering perspective how to get the oil out of the ground, and I understand the balance sheet. It's an understanding of, okay, fine, how does volatility theory flow into the overall process, and also what technologies are coming to play in the market, not only now, but down the road, that is basically disrupting the industry. And I use the classic example. 5 years ago, we never heard of a driverless car. Today, it's a reality, to the point that it ran into a bus in California recently. Well, it wasn't the driverless car's fault. It was the bus's fault. At least that's what Google said. So how is that? How are things, simple things like that, are triggers? And it comes back to the whole, ability to understand the external environment and keep a pulse on the key things that are not necessarily directly aligned to your environment, but are on the periphery that are starting to grow. You need to keep your eye on things like the solar or the renewable energy, particularly solar and wind, and what's happening with them. You need to keep your eye on the automotive industry and the shift towards electric cars, because the more that we move towards that market, the less reliance there is on petrol. Eventually, maybe not today, but 5 years from now, if you start having 20 million, 30 million electric cars, think of what that does at the petrol pump. It's a combination of, coming to class and reading up on oil and gas and being interested in the industry is one thing, but it's the peripheral stuff in terms of where's your analytical capability in relation to understanding all the environmental factors that are happening in the market, not just tangible, but intangibles.